Hello folks and welcome back. In this video I just want to do a brief recap and revision under this latest module, module 18, which should be the final module on this course, putting it all together where you can see I've already uploaded the claiming a allodial title for private conveyance walkthrough, as well as the tax exempt foreign status, which kind of does bring everything together with what I've refined from everything that's come before. Okay, that we'll briefly just go over as, again, like a revisionary aid. But also, I want to use this to act as a checklist and a head check for you folks who are still getting things together, maybe for your estate, to make sure that you're ticking all the boxes in regards to, getting your certificate of the identity made up for your diplomatic status, your security agreement, okay, most important documents, having that done with the correct names, okay, with the Trinity that we've gone through. And then obviously, do the necessary filings to perfect that security agreement, whether it's the UCC and or the PPSR based on where you are around the world. And then obviously, we've gone through, the amendments, the UCC 3 assigning, even on the PPSR, you can do that, which I kind of cover, going through, I think, claiming a allodial title or tax exempt status, one of the two. Okay, so if you want more information on that, you can go through those videos, and that I kind of read through all the documents and show you how you can do that on the PPSR when assigning, similar to the UCC. And then obviously, make sure you have your indemnity bonds and set-off bonds sent in, which again, at this level, you need your security agreement in play with the filings first, and then you do your bonds, right? So it's all referencing the original filing that perfected the security agreement. So set-off bond, indemnity bond, and then from there, basically, your estate is pretty much set up. And right, if you're at this level, that means you've gone through all of what has come before on the course that I feel is, very necessary in order to accrete all of the knowledge required that obviously allowed me to compile these latest, more advanced aspects, as you can see expressed here. Okay, so it's kind of like a good point, I guess, to reflect on what has come before and see it kind of perfected and put in action. And this is by no means the end for me with, what I can apply going forwards. And obviously I'm still working on trying to liquidate the estate. But once you have the bare minimum set up, that's then when you can start, doing these things like claiming a allodial title to assets. You can even, give it a go with the house that I talk about under that module, under that lesson. Claim your tax exempt status, obviously, get a allodial title, and you can obviously have a pop at trying to liquidate the estate, which is obviously what I'm trying to do at the moment. And also think about, attacking mortgages when you're at this level, when your whole estate is protected and set up. And also, possibly at some point in the future, tax recoupments. I mean, that would be unnecessary if you do manage to liquidate the estate. And also making, big ticket items or asset purchases when trying to unlock performance by the Treasury, who has the bonds, the set-off bond especially, in order to try and, navigate around this so-called trustee detentor capacity setup of what they see us in, which makes them reluctant to want to perform. However, as we've seen with my evidence with the car insurance case, that they're also reluctant to want to enforce whenever litigation ensues, because that then brings the bonds into the limelight where they know they have to perform on, okay, which obviously, so I've gone through many times before, this particular case of me, issuing my own surety bond for car insurance. In the end, once I dealt with the actual people who knew what I was doing, which is the solicitors, right, they issued the letter to confirm that the fine and the penalty has been cancelled. Okay, so then at this stage, it kind of literally becomes embodying the knowledge on your own 2 feet, given any situation you might find yourself in, whether it's presentments coming through the post and or dealing with, agents, policy enforcers on your own 2 feet in person, right, and learn how to have your behavior match your assertions and have substance over form, which basically means that you're acting like what is put on paper in regards to how you've set up your estate. Okay, you are in cohesion with everything you're doing on paper, with how you're verbalizing and acting and behaving when interacting with other agents within the system, and obviously any presentments that come your way. If they're none the wiser, they're not notified of your status, you then correct their assumptions, presumptions by, writing back to them, and this is how we have to then go forward and move forward. And that's pretty much like maybe 50 to 60% of, maybe even more, probably 70 to 80% of cracking the code in this game is once you have all your papers set up and you've got that paper trail and you've got it all, recorded, sent, registered post, and you've got your permission through silent acquiescent admission. It's just a matter of being able to stand on your own 2 feet and educate and correct, stop and correct any agency, policy enforcer, or anyone else for that matter who might not be privy to your status, about your status and your standing. Again, it might even be, if you get to a point where you're gauging the level of understanding of particular folks, especially these policy enforcers, that you might just have to maybe accept defeat in regards to accepting paperwork to process a presentment. Obviously, like I did with this case with the Hort. So, short, yeah, no worries, but I have this paperwork, but okay, we want you to verify this. I head down to the police station, so I thought, okay, we'll do this. We'll try and educate these folks who had no idea. And then obviously later they issued this fixed penalty, okay, conditional offer of fixed penalty. And then obviously I had to respond to that. And that's when it ended up in the hands of the senior officers, the solicitors, the guys high up who actually knew the power behind what it is we are doing. Okay, and that becomes, like I said, probably 70% or 80% of the battle is dealing with the bailiffs, dealing with the policy enforcers, and dealing with the uneducated agents within the system. But through the paper trail and through standing your own 2 feet, acting honourable and peaceable as always, and referencing everything that you are doing with the paperwork, bring that to light. In the end, it's all going to be resolved. Okay, and so that's pretty much most of, once you get to this level, it's just making sure you embody it and you can stand your own 2 feet off the top of your head, reciting everything that you have on paper. Okay, and that just comes with rinse and repeating and 7 times exposure and getting up to that kind of competency or conscious competency or unconscious competency, right? And it will come. You just got to keep going through and don't do anything that you obviously do not know firsthand what it is that's actually doing for you and how you can utilize this as a technology going forward. Okay, but the more you study, like I've done, the more it become obvious. All right, so just to recap, briefly skim over, we had the introduction, which introduced the kind of economic backdrop, the live life claim. We had a look at, obviously, the poster road mechanics, which was very important. Regis is the crown. When you register something away, you give your title and rights away to the thing. So it's much better to close a loop on our own estate, whether that be through a digital mailbox address where you can venue your Strawman going forward, or at your care of address, doesn't really matter. Digital mailbox address obviously has another benefit in regards to creating another veil of privacy. And if you're moving around a lot, you can just still have your Strawman stationed there, and you can have anything and everything that is involved with the Strawman with dealing with this system, this address, and that digital mailbox address that you can organize the estate from, and obviously register things with. And you can also, with banks or anyone else, quite easy nowadays on Adobe, you can go on and go online, download, for instance, a utility bill. Say if you need to prove that you are living at that so-called digital mailbox address, you can just click edit, right, and then it will highlight the addresses, and you can actually come in here and change addresses. For instance, if this was a utility bill, you can then change it to the address that is your digital mailbox address that you set up for your Strawman to interact and engage with this system. Okay, so very, very powerful stuff. In order to do that, to maybe consider. So yeah, introduction was just highlighting these facts, and then introducing the forensics on the form surrounding the birth certificate, and obviously going back to what I learned later on in the course to highlight it from the beginning for those new folks coming through about the name. Okay, the importance of displaying the 3 separation of the name with the given name, born identity, the Strawman, Holy Ghost, and the name of the father, surname. So then we went on to quantum grammar and language fraud, which is a big one from Dave Miller and Mark Kishon Christopher's course that I did, which is obviously highlighting the fact of these guys being able to pull rabbits out of hats when it comes to leaving everything open to interpretation. We're not defining the language, right? And now Dave Miller revealed that there should only be one thought, one sentence, and one word, one meaning. But with what they have set up with their sentence structures, it's all babble, right? And this is why he came up with the quantum grammar, or the correct sentence structure communications parse syntax grammar, that otherwise highlighted, the fictitious conveyance of language, false and misleading statements, mail fraud, perjury, etc., etc., that we can rely on, again, now as a weapon under the conditional acceptance banner to kind of blow away their most powerful tool is to be able to pull rabbits out of hats with the solicitors and the judges, especially when asking, what language are you speaking in? Because we understand and understand or comprehend, much cleaner word, right? Stand, if you understand, you stand under someone. To comprehend that you guys have many legal dictionaries and you have very different definitions to words that we otherwise use in plain simple English. So please do not disable me, and please let me know what dictionary you're using to define the words that you're trying to prosecute me in, or whatever it is you're dealing with, even the presentments, or even speaking to officers or judges in the court. Language is very, very powerful, and it can switch off their ability to, like I said, pull rabbits out of hats. Okay, so that alone is pretty much very, very powerful. And later on, we obviously show you how we can use this as a couple of questions on the conditional acceptance to help expose the fraud and remove their power from the magicians of this system. Okay, so that fell under obviously legalese, and I go through sharing doing the forensics on the forms as well, which is important to introduce when actually going through and showing the incorrect verbiage and the sentence structure of the grammar. And this also highlights the fact that we leave high school with only a grade 8 level of reading and writing, and that's defined under the Gunning-Fogg Index. And so that's the kind of universal level of grammar, reading and writing that we're all taught, and that is perpetuated and proliferated in society with movie scripts, newspapers, news scripts, TV shows, you name it. And so all the acts, codes, regulations and legislations that are written are basically written at a PhD level or higher deliberately to switch off that gap between a grade 8 and a PhD level understanding or understanding that is needed to comprehend these complex sentence structures of all these laws that are passed. Okay, and as we know, we've gone through, I certainly have, it takes a few weeks to months to reframe your minds with what is being done with the language that otherwise switches off our universal intelligence by bridging our subconscious and unconscious parts of ourself with the poison prefixes that poison the root words, right? And then the suffixes that take it away from the now time, and then obviously the complexity of these sentences, it kind of all acts to just keep us confused and disengaged with our higher intelligence. Okay, but when you do go through reframing and restructuring your mind with this in mind, you can pick it apart and develop the comprehension to be able to sit there, and patience and ability to be able to sit there and string together these complex sentence structures, right? That we've all seen in regulation, that there's like this one condition, and then they have all these sub-conditions, and then some are dependent on other moving parts, and then it comes back to close the loop on the original sentence. And so you often have to go through like a couple of paragraphs to get the full meaning of the first initial statement. Okay, so it does take a while, but it's very fruitful. And then through this process, we ourselves develop the ability to be able to read and write at a PhD level or higher. Okay, so that was very important. Module 2, so module 3 went into seals, shields, emblems and crests. Okay, it's important to get our flag and vessel, a flag and crest on our vessel made, because these documents are otherwise vessels floating in a sea of space, right? And that appeases international maritime admiralty law. So very important to also stamp your authority, and it just acts as another emblem and a kind of sign and symbol within this game to say, hey, look, this is us. We identify with this, and we're making sure we're appeasing all the laws of maritime admiralty with these vessels, even though these are, documents. What's a dock? A dock for the mind. Ment is the root word of mental. Okay, and these are all vessels floating in a sea of space, and they're being delivered along the sea lanes with the postal road mechanics to foreign vessels in dry dock, which are addresses. Okay, and if you recollect, we go back to, obviously, I think, probably in more detail in later modules, but with the postal road mechanics, the seat of every government is the post office, and the UPU is the international agency that kind of orchestrates and tells every post office of every nation the laws to follow in regards to their tracking and tracing systems and number systems, right? And we can see this displayed on the actual notes of money that's being made, and also the registered postal stickers. It's all very uniform, very similar, just slightly nuanced in different places, but it all follows the similar UPU code, right? That they are the most powerful organization on the planet. They are neutral. because they govern every contract, treaty and trust and money that is circulated around the world, and they are needed to be established in the first place for even governments to be formed. Okay, so that's where the power is with us gaining that knowledge when administering our own estate and setting things up ourselves under our own sovereign hand and seal, running our own court of office, keeping immaculate records and invoking the UPU with everything we're doing, when registering things ourselves, which retains title and rights to the thing. So Module 4, Bills of Exchange Act 1882, again, was another important one, just to highlight, the kind of debt notes we're dealing with, the money that we're dealing with, which is just debt, right? And how to appease that with the requirements. And then also looking at, the inchoate instrument to satisfy, putting our endorsement on the back of everything that we do. So it's not seen as being an inchoate instrument, and we simply do, our autograph, thumbprint and our date. Then we have Module 5, how to write your letters, obviously introducing, some of the verbiage and structures of our letters with the headers and footers, which is very, very important. Again, I think also in, quantum grammar and language fraud, we start looking at forensics of letters and picking apart letters, as I revealed going through some loan agreements of me doing the correct sentence structure, parsing, syntax, grammar, exposing the fraud and asking them to reveal, what it is you're actually saying with your definitions, and can you present this presentment or loan agreement in the correct sentence structure, parsing, syntax, grammar. So good skill to have is to, from the bottom up and from the top down, go through their documents, pick it apart, and, focus on the language, like, who's you have been charged, please define who you is. It says that you have been charged, etc. They often sign, on behalf of a generic kind of corporate shell of a position and not their private capacity. And even if there is a name that's put down, 9 times out of 10, it's kind of just a made up name that's linked to a computer or a particular desk, so they're all hiding behind these masks, these personas. So you can, develop this ability to do forensics on the letters, especially, is very important when picking apart their frauds and then, approaching it in an honourable way under conditional acceptance, okay, which obviously I introduced in the beginning when doing the actual forensics on the birth registration form. That meant that we're all declared a stillborn who died without will and test date, be with the criminal charged and made security for the national debt, okay. So it's that kind of logic that we must start developing at this stage as investigators, investigative lawyers, solicitors, journalists. Just having that scientific, investigative, rational mind is going to really benefit folks on this journey when picking apart any presentments they're sending our way to try and charge the straw man, okay? I mean, in an ideal world, you will not be really, you whiz through all these modules and then go get your security agreement done, indemnity bond, set off bond, perfected all on the UCC, PPSR, and then from there start attacking and challenging anything or everything that you're dealing with these folks. Okay, so that just gives you a lot more power to rely on when you have your security agreement in play, you got your bonds in with the Treasury, etc., etc. Okay, but that's in an ideal world. You can still combat the system, as I've proven, without kind of relying on the bonds so much and just tit for tat back and forth with the letter writing and recording everything you're doing, and in the end you do get a remedy. So module 6, we had status correction, okay, where it shared the rudimentary, or the kind of beginning, I guess, of the more beginner level status correction packs, okay, that I got my hands on early on also, and actually sent in, and other things you can start thinking of in regards to registering your name as an LLC, which I think Don Killam that I shared, there was a success story with him in the courts, as you can see here, where he registered his name as an LLC, and so when the judge called that name, he showed that this is a limited company. I'm here as an authorized representative on behalf of the trust in the matter in question, etc., etc. And in the end, the judge just chucked it out, and it was really interesting because it's a traffic citation case, and you can see there was about 3 or 4 people called up before Don Killam, and they were obviously accepting that they were the name, the straw man, they were acting as surety, and so that dragged them under their maritime amity jurisdiction, where they had to accept the fine and the penalty on their license for the traffic infringement, right, without any real injured party. Whereas when Don Killam came up and the judge called him, he immediately showed that this entity that you're calling is a limited liability company. I'm the authorized representative here on behalf of the trust, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you guys can watch it in your own time. But again, very powerful, just showing an alternative way of being able to set up this separation, right? That people may want to use as a tool going forward. Like a Swiss Army knife, we have many available tools here on this course. That's the whole idea. Teach a man how to fish, right? Rather than give him a fish. So you have a tackle box, and so you know what to do when you set out into these bankrupt commercial waters, what to rely on, what to pull on in order to combat the system, okay? But with obviously registering your name as an LLC, that brings it under the stipulations of the charter of that bankrupt corporate state, which means that you have to do tax filings, you have to appease information requests and updates, etc., etc. Okay, so you can just operate it as a shell company, which runs no money through it, or you can actually run money through it, but then means you have to do tax returns, and that subjects you to paying tax, etc. Okay, so there's obviously pros and cons to any technology that we utilize, but certainly in this case, proven that it does show the separation. Okay, I mean, a security agreement, in my eyes, is probably the single best way of being able to show the separation without having to fall under the jurisdiction of the state when also claiming tax exempt status for that entity also. Okay, so it's just there for people to consider as information to do what they please. You can also, with these different corporate entities registered with the system, with the kind of benefits and limitations they have, we all know we have trusts, we have corporations, and we have ministries, which are faith-based organizations. So using the same principle of registering your name as an LLC, why not register your name possibly as a 508c1a? Okay, and that kind of shows the separation again, that you're just a founding director. You could be a secretary of the treasurer, a clergyman for this entity in question. That is a 508c1a. That also gives it tax exempt status under international law, the Hague Convention. Okay, so it's just more food for thought for individuals to think about when learning to play the game. So also go for the declaration package walkthrough, which introduces us to unlocking the power of the IDs, okay, which in itself, again, is just a mini, kind of one of the first mini status correction letters that I put together myself to send in after I got these IDs made up, okay, and I sent this to the Vatican and the United Nations, so more on an international level. And I actually have had success with this, which we'll get to in a later module, which was quite interesting, involving PayPal, and just to help unlock, me wanting to be identified as a diplomat, okay? And so pretty early on, but again, just giving you guys examples of maybe some of the verbiage and some of the things you might want to put together in a pack, okay? I mean, for those who go through this course, I'd hope, like I advised in the beginning, go through it all, make notes, and then come back, work through it again, and then just go with what you feel you're resonating with in regards to your level of consciousness and understanding of the subject, put it into action. And as I found with myself, as I created the knowledge and moved forward on this journey, I came into perfecting and refining packs and letters with what came before, and just sent them out again and kind of replaced the new with the old, and just move forward with the kind of new knowledge. And that's the whole point, I guess, of this course, and why I've left behind what I've left behind. I mean, I've tried to refine it as best I could with what is on here, the curriculum, but I found when I went through it, it was like, no, I need to leave it there, because that's literally my journey of getting up to where I am now. And I learned all of this, and I could not be here if it wasn't for every single step that I've taken, that I've shared with these modules and lessons. Okay, so it all serves its purpose to build up the frequency of accretion and understanding of the subject and confidence that goes with that. And then, cover the Data Protection Act again, which is, very important to, stipulate in a letter, which might be, to cover all aspects of what it is you want to try and notify, or just, again, dealing with that particular agency that deals with data protection, which was, I think in the UK, the GCHQ or something. So, depending on where you are, you have an equivalent. So you might want to put a pack together, just a letter withdrawing consent on that, and then obviously using the post-road mechanics to generate that perpetual claim number, keeping a record of it being sent out, so it's appeased, withdrawing your consent, silence and acquiescent admission, so that you're kind of protected, and then keep that stashed away on your records, and you can have it all linked to your QR code on your ID to pull up that kind of, again, defends your standing and status within the system. Then we go into also, copyright. There's so many other ways in which to, protect the name, protect that entity, security agreement, copyright, template, etc. Okay, and then obviously I kind of mentioned about advanced status correction, treasury pack, to consider, guys, before, maybe thinking about doing anything here. Wait till you go and study that module. And obviously the power of no, which is the scene out of the Matrix, which is quite interesting. And that's all a story of the hero's journey, which is each and every one of us waking up to become Neo, rising out of the matrix of control and taking back our own power. So you can draw a lot of inspiration for that. Smart Module 7, how to discharge debts, fines and taxes. I mean, this was me basically going over, showing the back and forth when I was using conditional acceptance with certain debt collection agencies and solicitors, which I did have success in regards to stopping them enforcing. However, when dealing with the credit reference agencies, they were stubborn to not want to wipe out the defaults, even though I was sending in evidence that there was no lawful debt. They weren't able to, lawfully provide evidence of that debt, okay, based on the letters. And so they were a little bit stubborn to want to, or reluctant to want to, wipe that clean. However, there was a lot of success with dealing with these agencies, and it was very insightful. A lot of wisdom was, gleaned from that, with showing how they respond and the tactics they use and the kind of verbiage and sentences they use, which I picked up a few good sentences from some of the solicitors that I was dealing with also, one of which was, we do not give you permission to make a legal determination about the entity you're trying to accost. Furthermore, etc., etc. Okay, so we do not give them permission. They even said that to me when I was kind of coming back at them with, stipulations to make them liable, and they said, we do not give you permission to make a legal determination about me or the entity you're trying to accost. Okay, so very, very interesting when actually dealing with, solicitors and their kind of verbiage and the game that's being played, which was very fruitful. I think we also looked at my court case and court summons, where I kind of amalgamated the conditional acceptance as well as the correct sentence structure, communication, parse syntax, grammar, which was used to successfully rebut the summons. Again, they just, didn't process anything, and, that just ended up going quiet. And we go into a little bit more on securitization. Obviously, credit reports, reference agencies, they're a bit stubborn to deal with. Accepted for value as well, so introduce the accepted for value, which is obviously something we perfected later on in the course and more advanced aspects with, what we're doing with the bonds, the set of bonds especially, and mortgages, which is obviously from Bill Turner, with his approach on dissecting the fraud that is involved with the mortgages. And obviously, as I found out later on, the banks as credit creators, which is, again, more ammunition that people may want to rely on when approaching what banks are, the misrepresentation there. And when the loan was issued, the books did balance, there is no debt, lack of consideration, misrepresentation. What did the bank risk? Evidence that they lost nothing, etc., etc. Okay, so it's all very good. And then obviously I got 1099 debt discharge method, which again, I've had no success with, but just introducing, because there might be more room in order to crack the code with that, in order to go back to in some point in the future, and those individuals might feel more of a pull towards wanting to work with that. Okay, and you never know, people might crack the code with that and share it with the group. So then we have module 8. So yeah, just to finalize under module 7, how to discharge debts. We understand, obviously the first proof I had of discharging the debt was with the bonds. This is when I knew the bonds were very powerful with the cover letter and proof of posting, right? Because they were trying to charge that Strawman entity, but because of the bonds, they were able to set it off or even just cancel it, which is basically setting it off. Okay, so I knew that was very powerful. But what is also very, very powerful and important to practice is this conditional acceptance as well. And there's basically 4 ways we can respond. If you recollect, this is all stuff I learned from Bill Turner's website as well. Very powerful stuff, simple but very powerful, that you should know off the back of your hands. Okay, 4 ways we can respond to the system with any presentments or charges brought to the Strawman, right, under the maritime amnesty system. We can either accept it, pay, fine, don't argue, we're just going to pay, that's honourable. We can argue or dispute it, that's dishonourable. We can fall silent, which again is dishonourable, and or we can conditionally accept, okay, upon proof of XYZ for the avoidance of fraud and perjury. All right, so that's also what keeps us in honour. So you can either just pay it outright, which again is one strategy people can use. Okay, if you just want to pay go back to the drawing board if you're not confident enough and feeling like, okay, yeah, I want to go give this a go, back and forth, try and use the bonds if you've got the bond set off to set this off, and have a go at, initiating yourself when dealing with these guys, okay? Because it is a bit of an initiation, as I found out, but it's great practice. You need skin in the game, ink on paper, back and forth, okay? It does take a little bit of time and energy, all right? But don't forget, there's always the strategy of just pay. Pay, and then they'll leave you alone, all right? Or if you want to contest it, do it under conditional acceptance, always, okay? So that's what keeps you in honor, all right? It puts the burden of proof on the claimant, which is them, when they're coming at you with the presentment. So we have modulate, insurance, CPass bonds, passports, and Strawman account. Okay, this is obviously when I go into the car insurance case, which we all know by now, which again was very, very powerful, that otherwise proved exactly this, okay, due to the very fact that securities have now replaced substance as collateral for debt, due to the bankruptcy of the United Kingdom corporations and the IMF, including all subsidiaries in government in their private corporate capacity, and that there is no money in circulation of any value in which to pay, only debt, and all debt is created on paper. Therefore, all debt can be discharged and issued on paper. I exercise my right and unlimited exemption to use this negotiable instrument to ensure that upper and lowercase, which I thought at the time was representing, my born identity, which we know I worked out later on, does not. However, it was a way and means in which to show this separation, hopefully. Secured party to what I thought, all caps, was the Strawman, and any and all personal vehicles owned by myself involved in any incident is hereby covered by this bond to the value of the £1 million sterling. Okay, you agree that a copy of the bond is proof of insurance unless explicitly stated otherwise. All right, so that was such a powerful paragraph that otherwise really did prove through this whole case of, taking off my car insurance after this, I had nothing back from them when sending in this bond. And then 2 months after me driving around without, having this bond in place and not having conventional insurance, I get pulled over by a copper. Obviously had the ANPR system on, and I was basically saying, look, I do have insurance. He's like, do you know why I pulled you over? It's like, no, you don't have any insurance. I was like, but I do. Do you mind if I go to the glove box? I've got the paperwork. And he's like, yep, sure. So pulled it out, showed him, explained briefly. And he goes, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, he pulled out his book, and apparently he said, if you've got a bond worth £500,000 in the court, that's deemed valid insurance. And I thought that was quite interesting, but I said, no, this is with the Department of Treasury Transport, as you can see here, but up to the value of £1 million. He goes, okay, well, I can't do anything here, but I'll issue a hort to go into the police station and sort it out with them. And so, 2 or 3 days later, I did. There's the horts, the evidence. And then I was basically trying to explain the same situation to the guys in the office, the police station, went over their heads, right? And they just said, look, leave the documents with us. So I left them a copy of this that I printed out again. And I think a week or 2 weeks later, I got this through the post. And so obviously I responded, the honourable thing to do, conditional acceptance, stopping correcting their assumptions, presumptions, with the evidence of the bonds, okay, under this postal registration number, because at the time, I don't know what happened to the actual proof of delivery, but that was on the pack that I had in my glove box and that I gave to the guys at the police station. But for whatever reason, it's just disappeared on Dropbox and on my PC. But it was there, and that was something that was otherwise recorded, and that was the number that it was proof of posting, sent to the Department of Transport. And then, you guys can read through this. Obviously, kind of mingled that with conditional acceptance, and this otherwise highlights, some of the stuff that we can ask them. That would be very hard for them to prove, a valid lawful claim of any debt, okay, or charge brought against the Strawman, which is all Admiralty Maritime penal codes under martial law. There's no injured party coming forward, which is all common law. That's what we should be under. Innocent until proven guilty, and unless there's any evidence of someone's loss or injury, then it's all maritime Admiralty bullshit. And so send that in, and obviously get the confirmation the offence has been reviewed and right to confirm that the fixed penalty noted above has been cancelled. Okay, so cover that and modulate, and then we go into the making joinder to your passports and driver's license and things like this, which again is kind of David Wynne Miller's, Mark Kishon Christopher's technology, the quantum grammar, the postal road mechanics, Postmaster General, and having a look at Fidelity, the Strawman accounts, getting hold of your QSIPs, which I think since have moved the goalposts a little bit with the way they navigate their website. But with a little bit of due diligence, you should be able to, work it out and try and track down your bonds linked to mutual funds. Is it necessary? Not really. I feel when it comes to, doing these things with setting up the bonds, you don't need the QSIP and stuff. But when maybe going to court to prove beyond all reasonable doubt that there may be a private trust in operation, then the QSIP might be very handy when you're approaching seeking discovery, right, as an applicant to the respondent, which is obviously where I tripped up with my statement of claim in the courts, the Supreme Court, to try and sue the Crown. I was going right for the jugular. I was suing them not only for, the SEDI-KB trust and want them to liquidate the estate, but also with the banking fraud, the misrepresentation, wanted monetary reform and everything else with it, right? So I was overcomplicating the matter, but I was, I feel like I put enough evidence in with the forensics and the forms. I mean, it's pretty clear on paper what it is when we registered the birth certificate with that birth certificate that we receive, what that means from their very definitions in their legal dictionaries and acts, that it's in black and white, that's what's being done. Declared a stillborn, died without will and testate, imbued with a criminal charge, and made security for all the national debt. But they just wanted to, they just chucked it out, so it wasn't enough for me to be able to, prove that there is these private trusts, SEDI-KB trust on the private side of the ledger. I've got this committee of 300 document now, and obviously with, Werner's empirical research, it just goes to show that you have to approach it with, without, beyond all reasonable doubt that there is enough evidence there to commence the proceeding if you do want to go through court in regards to suing the Crown and potentially getting some kind of, not enforcement, but maybe subpoena or action or performance rather from these guys when wanting to liquidate the estate, right? And that's something obviously I've had to contemplate when walking away from my first attempt, which I'll probably do another video on actually, just to kind of go over what happened there and the standard plausible deniability, lacking a cause of action, failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted, frivolous and vexatious filings, waste of the court's time. We've heard it all before, right? Even though I felt like, the evidence, the forensics and the forms was pretty just, it's black and white in their definitions. Werner's empirical paper proves that banks are credit creators, but I was kind of maybe approaching it a little bit differently. So yeah, it's kind of going back to the drawing board and maybe approaching it with seeking more information from the respondent as me coming in as an applicant in order to try and disprove the fact that there is not a private trust based on the evidence I've conjured. And this is where maybe the QSIP numbers might come in handy to help prove that fact, right, and get things moving in that regard. So quite interesting. But yeah, so module 9, certificate of the identity, we went through, very important, which is obviously part of this declaration, the first kind of declaration that I did, and otherwise kind of unlocks the power of these IDs. And then my testimonial of being able to use this ID when traveling to America, when there was still, strict vaccine requirements, and I managed to get myself to Denver when putting on the attestation form, the exemption of being a diplomat, which worked. It was quite funny. They asked me if I wanted security to escort me to the plane. Okay, so I thought, it's not necessary, but just goes to prove that we've got these IDs made up. You got the declaration sent in, and you go ahead, substance over form, let your behaviors match your assertions. You're stepping in, you're actually donning that title now of our own sovereign estate. And obviously this is important with the module because we go through the logic behind how we can assign ourselves as diplomats, which I got thanks to Bill Turner's work under the Montevideo Convention 1933 that he also had success in using, which inspired me to go and get this done, which made a lot of sense to me. And obviously I enhanced it with our knowledge of the postal road mechanics and digging out more of the codes in the UPU, and we can also get that apostilled, which again kind of makes it more legal or lawful internationally within their system under every nation as part of the Hague Convention. Okay, so obviously, yeah, walk through how you guys can do that, and obviously how you can make the IDs yourself as well to save a bit of money. So it can be quite time consuming doing the graphics, but once you have the template, super easy to renew and do. And then yeah, module 10 was a little bit of a trivial module that I kind of thought I'd just leave because it got some interesting information surrounding the SEDI-KB trust that I got from Bill Turner, and a way in which to potentially go after accessing it, which obviously bore no fruit, but otherwise proved to maybe offer a little bit more knowledge in regards to this subject and trying things out and just practicing the letter writing and getting to know more on the subject of the setup that we're in. And then Bill Turner's presentation that goes through that as well, which is quite interesting. I think that was a vesting deed, approach it through a vesting deed. So module 11, we've got the Uniform Commercial Code, okay, which is the UCC, which is very important, going through UCC connection, that otherwise, shows the waters we're swimming in, and how every member state as part of UNIDROIT is basically using the UCC as their code disguised as statutory jurisdiction, which is basically maritime amity law disguised as statutory jurisdiction within the courts. Okay, so very, very important for us to go through Article 1 to 9, understanding more of what is being used internationally, covertly in a lot of other nations. Obviously in the US it is overt, but to prove the fact that a lot of these other international agencies are using this in their courts, UNIDROIT, through the UCC connection, which is from that book that I got. Otherwise, kind of proves that we've got even China, Russia, the BRICS, most of the West, a lot of these nations around the world are signed up to it, which is this agency that holds the copyright in the UCC, which is located very close to the Vatican in Rome. So all roads do lead back to Rome still. Module 12, business registration, banking, money and investments. This was where I used my declaration to reopen my PayPal account, my business PayPal account, when they're requiring evidence of registration and tax file numbers, etc., etc. And so this was otherwise proof again that something as simple as this was quite interesting, that they then unfroze my account and proceeded forward, and I've been able to use it ever since. I think this was back in maybe 2021 or 2020 when I put this in, when this happened, maybe 2021. And yeah, now 2025, almost 2026, and yeah, I've had my PayPal business account without needing to upload any confirmation of VAT numbers, tax numbers, registration numbers of my business. Okay, so just again, interesting to see just from that simple declaration how they changed that. PayPal is PayPal as well, which is linked to the Vatican, which is what this was sent off to. And then also, yeah, go into highlighting maybe some other investments that people might want to consider and courses that you can do online, which is I think the ITPM, Institute of Trading and Portfolio Management, which is otherwise shared under investments in the Telegram group, which you can see here. So yeah, ITPM, very interesting, very good course, basically learning how the professional traders trade in the investment banks and the hedge funds, which can help aid in your economic knowledge and outlook of assessing the macroeconomic environment that we're in and our worldview based on maybe where you want to park your sweat equity after protecting your sweat equity with having your estate set up and claiming tax exempt status. Then we got module 13, asset protection and estate planning. This obviously introduces us to trust law, which is a big one, common law private trust with Gwen Wyckoff, as well as Yusuf L's trust course, and understanding the requirements surrounding trust and these kind of different types of trusts that are there. Then we go into the 508c1a ministry, which is another entity and vehicle that you can use within their system that has its perks and benefits like a trust does. 508c1a is completely tax exempt. It's got a lot less requirements compared to a trust, but a trust offers that protection in regards to being able to control everything but own nothing, and have it in a separate name of a trustee, and you can be the grantor and beneficiary and then maybe be employed as like a trust manager in that sense, but you need obviously multiple parties with these two entities. So yeah, these are definitely vehicles that we can use. And obviously with the 508c1a, we have the luxury of religious exemption that we can put in our bylaws to exempt us from anything and everything that the government and the state are wanting to do in order to imbue themselves and take away our freedoms and rights. Okay, so that's a good vessel to protect also our freedoms and rights. And also with a trust, I guess more so than with a trust also you can still kind of stipulate terms and conditions, but it's kind of, I guess, more intimately linked and probably worthwhile doing that when correcting your status and standing with the security agreement and just sending in these loan claimants linked to the Strawman if you want to do it outside of a ministry. Okay, but take nothing away from a trust and a ministry. They definitely all have their advantages and perks. And as we see with a corporation, a trust and a ministry, they're all pretty much very similar with regards to the trinity that these agencies are based on. So for instance, you've got a trust, you have the grantor and settlor. Okay, that's at the top of the pyramid, that then pledges something in trust, which is called the res, otherwise the collateral, right? And they hash out the trust indenture, which is the terms and conditions of that trust and how those assets should be managed, which is what the trustees follow as their job description, okay, on behalf of the beneficiaries, right? And that's the three-party setup with a trust. With a corporation, we have the founding directors, right? That then stipulates a mission statement, a plan going forward, a corporate charter, okay, which is the equivalent of obviously the trust indenture for a trust, which then gives the job description and the duties to the employees, which be, you know, everyone that is employed by the corporation to go about enacting the corporate charter on behalf of the beneficiaries, who are normally, you know, the customers, the world at large, if they're, you know, producing goods and services that benefit the world, the consumer, and society, but also the shareholders, right? Those who are invested into the company. And then with the ministry, similar Trinity setup, just named differently, right? With these entities, you have a founding director, again, founding directors, but then this time where the trustees were in a trust or the employees for a corporation, you'll have like the clergy, the secretary to the treasury, the treasurer, the prime minister, the bishop, the cardinal, you know, you name it, basically all those kind of ministry terms in there. And then the beneficiary would be otherwise the members, the citizens, again, the world at large again, okay, based on the charitable actions of that entity, that agency, and what instructs that ministry will be the bylaws. Okay, so you can see each and every one of those, how they share that kind of trinity, but just explained slightly differently, and each one has slightly different stipulations and terms and conditions under their system, okay? And this is how a lot of individuals within the system, the elite, the billionaires, they have corporations on the public interface side running their business, collecting their credits and profit. They then have that siphoned into a trust. And the beauty of a trust is that it can donate 100% of its profits then to a faith-based organization, whereas an LLC or company can't donate 100% directly to a faith-based organization. But if it's held within a trust, the profits get siphoned into a trust, and that trust as an entity can then donate 100% of its sweat equity to a faith-based organization such as a 501c13 and or a 508c1a. Okay, so you can see how even on the public side, there is this other method of them being able to siphon wealth from the public and almost into this entity that is still in the public but has all these beautiful exemptions such as tax exemption. Okay, and we see a lot of these guys do that and have that set up. Okay, but likewise there's another alternative, which is just capturing the straw man with the security agreement, and then from there making your tax exempt foreign status sent to your tax agency once you have your whole estate set up, right? Especially with the bonds, the indemnity bonds and the set-off bonds too. So those two are big modules, very important, very good vehicles to be using within this system, within the game. Again, based on people's situation and what they resonate with their knowledge. They might favor the 508c1a, they might favor a trust, they might favor all of them. You guys got a business set up, you might want the business, the trust, and the ministry. You might just want to operate through a security agreement like I'm doing at the moment, and the estate after capturing that straw man. Okay, so it's completely up to you guys. That's the beauty in this. You have a wealth of options here, and the knowledge there to see what you can benefit from when utilizing them. So module 15 again is another kind of trivial one that has had no success, but it's an interesting one to invite people to learn about possible tax recoupments. And there's obviously more work to be done there in regards to having a go at cracking that code. Whether I will revisit that in the future, we'll have to wait and see. But obviously, if I do, I'll give you guys some updates. I have seen proof of one individual using a ministry to unlock tax credits through the IRS or the equivalent in Canada, I think it was, which is quite interesting. But I needed a bit more information surrounding that. I wasn't very clear with how he was explaining things, how that happens. But he seemed to have produced evidence to suggest that he was receiving credit without the need to pay it back for the purpose of his ministry, through doing a similar process of how we manipulate these negotiable instruments with our signature and stuff like this, and the returns that are done. Okay, so I believe it can be done. It's just there's definitely more work that needs to be done with that, and so I just left that there for people to maybe go away and do in their own time. And obviously that's why I put the read there first, which is very important. So I had module 16, Advanced Treasury Pack Redemption Process. Again, really important to level up our understanding of securities and how to issue, control, and perfect our securities and assign our securities. All right, so very, very good practice, even though, again, nothing resulted from it, other than obviously helping to, send in these bullets on paper to the system, let them know that we know what's going on, and helping to shift the hologram, right? But, as I went away from that and moved into revisiting Bill Turner's work, I realized that there may have been some shortcomings with the pack itself, especially how we presented our names. Okay, so I addressed that in later modules, and that's when I rejigged my security agreement and my UCC filings and PPSR filings to reflect that, which is why I then went back and kind of mentioned that from the beginning, so people, when they go through considering putting a pack like this together, can do it right the first time when expressing the right parties in the right way. Okay, but take nothing away from this. This was, really, really perfect practice to, again, reach that next notch up, this next level up in understanding and accretion and knowledge of this process. Okay, so, very, very fruitful. And we kind of touched on also, the vehicle registration, insurance, load title as well, I think I cover, and more on the tax and accounting aspects of the returns. Okay, because the whole pack was based on Patrick Devine, which PJP kind of and Pat Devine worked on, which was based off of the Redemption Manual series that they otherwise added more value to, added a little bit more kind of extra sauce to. However, the names for me going away from that seemed to be the only kind of thing that was maybe not unlocking the full extent of what it is we wanted to achieve with this pack, right? With liquidating the estate, and especially with how the will was written, it just, we felt like we did everything right. I felt like I did everything right. I followed certainly all the steps, and it seemed pretty watertight to me. But again, we can't control for what these guys do at the end of the day when they receive these kind of requests, as I found out, because this whole system is built on literally keeping people under peonage and debt servitude and control. So yeah, very important to go through that pack and actually put together. So again, levels up our understanding and learning how to issue, control, assign, and perfect our securities at this more advanced level, which is elite international creditor level. So yeah, module 17 again kind of went away and perfected some of the shortcomings that I felt were in the previous pack, the Advanced Treasury pack. When I returned to Australia in 2024, I think it was, I started to revisit Bill Turner's work as I got my hands on my birth certificate registration, all the forms surrounding that. So I started to do the forensics on the forms and started to really kind of think about, right, let's start approaching trying to have a go at liquidating the estate properly when presenting the right names, and have a look at what Bill Turner's saying on the matter, which then around that time introduced me to, I came into Werner's work with how banks are credit creators, which was great, another amazing asset of information to utilize. And then also Alan Tyree's banking law book, when understanding how the courts see banks and the definition of a banker-customer relationship, which again was very fruitful, very revealing, that we can rely on, certainly to address obviously the banking fraud that's going on, especially with mortgages or any loans that you take out. They can use again as added ammunition to request for evidence for the avoidance of fraud and perjury. Okay, that kind of again was maybe the missing piece of the puzzle for me anyway. I can only speak for myself in regards to gaining that knowledge to get myself over the line and have everything ready and perfected, with going back to the drawing board now and getting all of these documents in order properly with everything that's come before. Obviously, the post-warning mechanics, the stamps, the seal, representing the names appropriately, signing off the names appropriately, as we can see of the three parties, okay, which is what we also do on the bonds, and then perfecting that on the UCC. By this point, the PPSR, I was able to navigate myself and just obviously, use what was available to me with the word count, which is a lot less than the UCC, but just, understanding the process of just get what's important on there, which are the parties and the document with the reference number and the registration number, and then have everything linked to that UCC likewise. Okay, so I had to redo, the security agreement, which meant redoing all the UCC filings, UCC3 assignments as well, and redoing the bonds. Okay, but again, it was all good practice. Thanks to Bill Turner, perfecting it, making it more concise, sending it all in again, keeping immaculate records, staying organized, and obviously having all the filings there alongside that. So all this is available to you folks under this module as well, also in the Telegram group, okay, for you folks to go through and backwards engineer, because it kind of speaks for itself, right? At this level, you guys should be more than familiar with the process and how to then go forward and unlock actually utilizing these technologies, whether you're on the defensive or you're trying to unlock performance. Okay, and so that is pretty much that whole module, with what I was finding in regulation as well related to the Unclaimed Money Act, which I tried to put in with my court case as evidence to suggest that there is, a private trust being administered with this name in regards to the public trustee issuing the letters of administration that I go through in this final lesson, as to my logic and rationale behind putting, a statement of claim and claim together after me trying to privately request for the liquidation of the estate with the public trustee. It was my first attempt, and then I came into the will, approaching it via the will, because all property can be disposed of via will, thanks to Bill Turner's work. And so then I issued it to the Governor General, appointed him as executor, heard nothing, and then I thought, I'm going to court, let's see whether we can, enforce this in the court. The Supreme Court had powers to revoke letters of administration and grant probate of the will, so I thought that's the perfect venue for me to go to approach this subject. But then I also convoluted it a little bit, made it more complicated with attacking the Crown and the legislation at a federal level in regards to the monetary policy and the banking law and how banks are defined and regulated within their system, right, as financial intermediaries, not as credit creators, which is what Verna empirically proved. But like I said, with the courts, these judges, their hands are tied, which I even show in a lot of these public trustee and Federal Reserve Bank of Australia acts. They actually take oaths of secrecy. Why would you take an oath of secrecy? Because there's obviously a private side of the ledger, right, which obviously was proven with the Committee of 300 document showing the bullion banks and all the list of private banks that are linked to that on the private side of the ledger, which they call, I think, off-ledger accounting practices or whatever it is within that document that I go through on YouTube. And otherwise, it's just a matter of having to go back to the drawing board now in order to rejig the way I'm going to approach this and try and liquidate the estate, but otherwise show, even within the regulations, the act starting to pick apart, again, using that scientific investigative mind to get to that point where once you have everything perfected with the estate, you can start approaching, going after, I guess, the cherry on top, the icing, which is, trying to liquidate the estate, going after mortgages, tax recoupments if you want to, try and acquire assets with unlocking performance with the treasurer who has your set-off bonds. But obviously, the ultimate goose that lays the golden egg is to liquidate and move right into the private. Okay, and so here we are, guys, back at module 18, which is obviously this first introductory video to recap everything and otherwise just offer some perspective, some reflection, and a congratulations, basically making it this far, because it's no mean feat by all means to, embody all of this knowledge of, the post-road mechanics, the economic backdrop, the language fraud, doing forensics in the forms, understanding the definitions, developing that mentality of, being able to investigate yourself, use your own intuition, being a self-starter, and then going into, being able to write your letters, making your seals, becoming a postmaster general of your estate, and then dealing with these guys back and forth and having a good understanding of, what's going on with contract law, trust law, tax law, and banking law, and how securities are now replaced substance as collateral for debt. Okay, and so, all serves its purpose to, get you to where you are now, listening to this video and applying this more advanced aspect with these documents. Okay, so that's all I wanted to do, guys, just to hop on, just to kind of reflect a little bit, congratulate you folks, and, make sure that you have all of your documents in order first before you then kind of put your neck out there and start having a little bit of fun with these guys, right? And just make sure you get your whole estate set up, exactly what it is we're doing, where the knowledge and power and logic is coming from, and understanding this process by understanding, the greater context, the waters we're swimming in, and what the remedies are, and all the tools that we can, utilize and rely on in order to achieve our freedom and protect our rights and freedom and sweat equity. Okay, so for me, currently, this is the best vehicle I'm using, which is just purely the security agreement. I have everything running through the Strawman, my website, my bank accounts, and so, any claimants that I wish to make, I just simply send it in, okay, on behalf of the estate at the same address as my Strawman, linked to everything that's come before: the security agreement, the indemnity bond, the set-off bond. So I've got tax exempt status for that entity. Also using that to acquire assets and then, acquire allodial title to private conveyances also. Okay, and so this whole process, you've got to think of the strawman itself. When it's given to you with that birth certificate and we're using it in commerce, stepping up as surety and agent for, unbeknownst to a lot of people, that's an unsecured debtor. Okay, and so through this process of issuing the security agreement, we're basically securing that debtor, and we're positioning ourselves as secured party creditor, principal, postmaster general when we're filling out documents the way we do, etc., etc. Okay, and so it's very, very powerful to position ourselves and show that separation through this document. And then obviously when you perfect it on the UCC, the PPSR, that kind of makes it lawful within their system and gives it more legal clout. And so we can use the same process to any and all other registered corporate entities that you might have, say for your business. Okay, that is otherwise an unsecured debtor, which is being pledged as collateral for all the debt, because the taxes that are raised are going towards servicing that debt, which is drawn on an account of zero balance, right? And so think about the process that we do with the strawman, we can do maybe with corporations that are registered with the state. Okay, what is the strawman? It's a corporation that's registered with the state, but through this process, we're recapturing it and redefining our relationship. Okay, it's like the quantum grammar, which is why we do the correct grammar. It separates the facts and introduces their relationship. Okay, you can maybe go away and do the same for a corporation. Make a security agreement. You can have it pledge all of its assets to you and your born identity, or even your straw man. You can then issue indemnity and set-off bond for that corporation to protect yourself when challenging the tax exempt status, and then go from there. Issue the tax exempt status and see what they say, see what they do. Protect that corporation you have registered. And that might be another means in which you folks might be able to protect its sweat equity, its profit, by not paying tax. Okay, so we all know what tax is under that module. If you don't, please go through this module in my original introductory video that shows what taxes are basically used to raise for, but this otherwise explains it quite easily in black and white, which is all, most of it is going towards paying off the national debt, which again is creating an account at zero balance whenever a government issues a bond to the central bank. Again, the central bank themselves are tax exempt under regulation, at least here in Australia, and I'm pretty sure it'll be the same the world over, which kind of reveals the game that's being played, because it makes sense. Why would they tax themselves? Because tax is what's used to pay their credit back that they're issuing to the governments, and the governments are then having to pledge the citizens' labour and sweat equity and GDP in order to appease servicing the debt and keeping them solvent, basically. All right, so just food for thought. Like I said, at this level, it's you have a wealth of tools and technologies here to rely on to go forwards and start having some fun. Okay, it's so important to get this done and set up, but from there you build your base. You have a solid base and a foundation. You can really start going out there and having fun and start attempting the more advanced aspects of this. Like I said, acquiring assets, liquidating the estate, look at tax recoupments, tackling mortgages should be very easy actually, especially when you've got your whole estate set up with your set-off bond, indemnity bonds, and highlighting the banking fraud. And it's just, I think from here, it's just a matter of understanding court procedure and how to work with court procedure to try and unlock, again, some remedies for us when trying to get performance, okay, from these folks, or even, trying to sue and hold people accountable for their actions within their commercial arena with, maybe some of the fraud they're getting up to and the hassle they're bringing you. Okay, and so that's probably another video that I will do in the near future. So I've got more work that I'm going to focus on changing tack and applying different technologies with approaching liquidating the estate. And with that, it's going to come obviously a lot of knowledge in regards to rules of civil procedure in the courts and the kind of tactics they rely on. Obviously, we all understand the court is the paper. Certainly go over that with the language Ford and David Wynne Miller, with the four corners and stuff like this and what's happening in the courts. A lot of people, I think you guys already know, but there's a way in which I think we can behave and act and play this game to unlock the courts coming to our aid in this matter, and at least maybe for more sensitive subjects, unlock performance when trying to get things done. Okay, whether that be having the bonds honoured for purchases, or set-offs with mortgages, and or liquidating the estate. All right, folks. So yeah, thanks for listening and watching. As always, thanks for your support. Keep an eye out. Obviously, any updates, I will notify you guys via email or Telegram. And yeah, go on and watch these next 2 videos and lessons that kind of amalgamates everything that's come before and perfects it, refines it with the latest technologies in action, and that you can draw inspiration from and go away and do yourself. And then from there, like I said, world is your oyster, and we've got a few other things that we can focus on. But also, don't forget to have fun, enjoy yourself, enjoy this world, enjoy your friends, enjoy your family, and pick and choose your battles wisely with this. But knowing that when you have this set up, you definitely sleep a lot more peacefully at night when embodying this knowledge, knowing that your whole estate is protected. Just got to make sure that your behaviors match your assertion and you have substance over form. Okay, and that's the key when interacting with any agent within the system, whether it's presentment or in person. Make sure you're reflecting everything that you have on paper coming through you as the vessel. Let that shine, let that be known intelligently, peaceably, and honorably. All right, guys, till next time, stay safe out there, study hard, and as always, stay sovereign. Ciao for now. All the best. Stay blessed.